Something is racing through the room around you, carrying real energy, warming your skin, lighting your world, and yet it weighs absolutely nothing, massless, perfectly weightless, still alive with force. Tonight we trace where that impossible energy actually comes from. Tell me softly where you are and what hour finds you, and if this helps you drift, a gentle like and subscribe keeps these quiet stories coming. Somewhere in the room around you right now, something is passing through the air that has no substance you could ever hold. It is landing on the surface of your skin. It is warming the edge of whatever is closest to the light, the fabric on the arm of the chair, the rim of the mug you set down a few minutes ago, the soft curve of your own cheek if the lamp is near enough to feel, and it weighs absolutely nothing. Not a little, not almost nothing, nothing. I want you to sit inside that sentence for a moment before we go anywhere else, because it does not sound like a real sentence. It sounds like a poem, or a paradox, or one of those clever things people say to seem thoughtful before turning back to easier subjects. But it is not any of those. It is one of the plainest facts we have about the universe. There is a thing that fills your room right now, that touches you constantly, that has crossed unimaginable distances to reach you, and that has no weight at all. Look around slowly. The lamp beside you, whatever kind it is, the soft yellow bulb of an old bedside lamp, the cooler white of a small reading light, the pale glow of a screen turned down low for the night. Somewhere in that glow, invisible to your eye but very real, tiny travelers are leaving that filament or that little emitter and moving out into the room. They are pouring off the surface of that lamp in numbers so large they are not really numbers anymore. They are landing on the walls, on the ceiling, on your hands, on the pages of the book you were reading, on the closed lids of your eyes if you have started to let them drift shut. And every one of them weighs nothing. Every single one of them. I keep coming back to that because I want it to sink in slowly. The universe is doing something very strange in your room tonight, and we walk through it every day without noticing. We flip a switch. The room brightens. We sit down. The warmth settles onto the arm we left too close to the bulb. We assume this is just what light does, the way water is what falls from a tap. We do not usually stop to ask what light actually is, and even more importantly, what it is made of, and how something with no weight at all can carry the warmth we can feel with the palm of our own hand. Here is what I want to walk with you toward tonight. Slowly, gently, in the way you might walk toward a strange sound in the middle of the night, curious rather than afraid. There is a small traveler I want you to imagine, just one, a single messenger of light, riding out from the surface of the lamp beside you, sailing across the small distance between the bulb and your skin, and delivering something. It is not delivering a package, exactly. It is not delivering a stone, or a ball, or any of the little things you might picture when someone says the word particle. This traveler does not have a body in the way that word usually means. It has no mass. It cannot be weighed. It cannot rest anywhere. It cannot be put on a shelf and looked at. And yet it arrives. And when it arrives, something happens. A tiny bit of warmth, a tiny push, a tiny nudge in the surface of whatever it lands on. If it lands on a needle inside a very sensitive instrument, the needle moves. If it lands on a leaf, deep inside the machinery of a plant, it starts a cascade of chemistry that ends up building sugar. If it lands on the back of your eye, in the correct part of the correct cell, it flips a molecule from one shape to another and, through a long chain of quiet biology, becomes something you experience as seeing. This small, weightless traveler, this messenger with no substance you could hold, is capable of moving a needle, warming a leaf, and making sight. That is what I want you to sit with tonight. That contradiction. Something has no weight, something has real effect. And somehow both are true at the same time, without any trick, without any hidden clause, without any of the usual escape hatches that let us pretend a paradox is not really a paradox. I want to be honest with you here. When I first started thinking about this in a serious way, it made me a little uneasy, not afraid, not the way real fear feels, but the way you feel when a floorboard under your foot gives a little softer than you expected. Something small under the world had shifted. Because if there is a thing in the room that is completely weightless and completely real, then I do not really know what real means anymore. I grew up assuming, quietly and without ever putting it into words, that the world was made of stuff, and that stuff had weight, and that when energy passed from one place to another, it did so by riding on a piece of that stuff, like a passenger on a train. That felt so obvious it did not even need saying. But the universe, it turns out, does not agree. The universe seems perfectly content to send things across billions of miles that have no weight at all, and to let those weightless things arrive with all their energy intact, and to use them to build the whole visible world we see. The sunlight on your window this morning was made of these weightless travelers. The starlight that reaches you on a clear night is made of these weightless travelers. The soft glow of the lamp beside you right now is made of these weightless travelers. And your eye, the little curved lens that lets you see any of this, only works because these weightless travelers arrive on time and deliver exactly the right small nudges to exactly the right molecules in the back of your retina. Everything we call visible is delivered to us by something with no weight. I want you to keep that in mind through everything we say tonight, because the whole story is going to hinge on it. The whole strange, beautiful story we are about to trace, from the lamp beside you, all the way down to the deepest layers of physics we currently know, is a story about how a thing with no weight can carry something so real. So let me put the question out plainly, because the whole rest of this piece is going to be one long, careful answer to it. If a photon has no mass, then what is doing the pushing when sunlight warms a surface? And where, exactly, does its energy actually live? Let that question sit in the room with you like a candle set on a table between us. We are going to keep coming back to it. We are going to circle it, look at it from many angles, and by the time the last part of tonight ends, we will know where that energy comes from, why it can travel without weight, and why the answer changes the meaning of every warm patch of light you have ever felt. But I am not going to give you the answer as a trick. I want you to know that from the start, this is not one of those places in physics where the puzzle gets solved by a clever redefinition, where somebody just says the words a little differently and the paradox goes away. This is not that. The answer we are walking toward is a real answer. It is a genuine reshaping of what matter is, what energy is, and what fills the space between things. When we are finished, you will not just have a fact in your pocket, you will have a different picture of the room you are sitting in. I said before that most of us grew up quietly assuming that energy needs a body to carry it. That felt like common sense. A moving car carries kinetic energy in its body of steel and glass. A stretched spring carries potential energy in the shape of its coils. A hot cup carries thermal energy in the trembling of its little molecules. In every ordinary case, when energy travels from one place to another, we can point to the thing that carried it. We can put our hand on the car. We can hold the spring. We can wrap our fingers around the mug and feel the warmth pass through. That is true. That is real. And yet, the universe is very old and very large and very quiet on the subject of what feels obvious to human beings. And when we look closely at the way the universe actually behaves, we find that the deepest form of energy transfer we know about, the one that lets the sun reach the earth and the stars reach our eyes and the lamp beside you reach your cheek, does not work the way our common sense would predict. It does not need a body. It does not ride on a piece of matter. Whatever it is that crosses the space between the sun and your window in the morning, it is not a stream of little pebbles. It is not a stream of any little somethings you have ever held. It is stranger than that, and lighter than that, and in a certain sense purer than that. That strangeness is where we are going tonight. That purity is where we are going tonight. Somewhere in the last 100 years or so, human beings figured out how to write down a very short equation that begins to describe what these little travelers actually are. I do not want to unwrap that equation yet. It is not that kind of night. I only want to mention it in passing, the way you might hear a distant church bell in another neighborhood and only half register it before returning to your book. The equation involves a number named after a man called Planck. It involves the idea of frequency, which is just a fancy word for how quickly something wiggles. And when you put those two ideas together, it tells you how much energy a single one of these weightless travelers carries. That is all I want you to hold for now. A number, a wiggle, a very small amount of energy, delivered by something with no weight. We will meet this equation again later, when we are ready for it, and it will not feel like a hurdle. It will feel like a door opening. For now, just let the equation stay in the corner of the room like a lamp turned very low. It is there. It is patient. It will wait for us. Because before we can meet it properly, we have to keep sitting with the strangeness. There is no shortcut to that part. You have to feel the softness under the floorboard for yourself. You have to notice, really notice, that something is happening in the space between the lamp and your skin that has no obvious explanation. You have to admit, quietly, that you have been walking through this without noticing every day of your life. And I am asking you to notice it now, on this quiet night, in the warm little pocket of light around wherever you are lying or sitting, because that noticing is where the whole story begins. Look at the lamp again, if it is easy to look at, or just imagine it. See the glow at its center, the soft, steady bloom of light spreading outward. Every second, out of that little glow, an unimaginable number of these weightless travelers are being born. They stream out in every direction at once. They fill the room in an instant. Some of them are landing on your ceiling right now. Some of them are landing on the far wall. Some of them are passing straight through the window, disappearing into the night outside, on their way to nowhere in particular, and they will keep going in a straight line until something stops them. If nothing stops them, they will keep going forever, forever. That is not a metaphor. If nothing intercepts them, they never slow down, they never rest, they never grow tired, they never fade. A weightless traveler leaving your lamp tonight and slipping out through your window could, in principle, be arriving at a planet on the far side of the galaxy in 100,000 years, still carrying the same small amount of energy it was born with, still moving at the same steady pace, still perfectly weightless, still perfectly real. Sit with that. The lamp on your bedside table is, at this very moment, radiating little messengers that could outlive every civilization on this planet. That is what light does. That is what the tiny warmth on your skin actually is, if you follow it far enough. And I have not even told you the strangest part yet. The strangest part is not that these weightless travelers exist. The strangest part is not even that they can carry energy without carrying weight. The strangest part is where the energy actually lives. Because if the traveler itself has no mass, then when we ask what the energy is attached to, we quickly find that it is not attached to the little traveler at all, in the way we usually mean that word. The energy of light is not sitting inside the photon the way heat sits inside a mug. The energy of light lives somewhere else, somewhere you have not been told about yet, somewhere that is going to change what you think the empty space in your room actually is. And that is where we are going in the next part. Not tonight, not in this opening, because we are still settling in. We are still lighting the fireside and pulling the blanket up around us. But I want you to feel the shape of what is coming. The energy of light does not live in the little traveler. It lives in something bigger, something quieter, something you cannot see but that has been surrounding you your entire life. Something that stretches from the tip of your finger all the way to the far edge of the observable universe without a single break. Something that is not empty in the way you thought empty was. That is the promise I want to leave you with as this first part draws to a close. We are going to trace this weightless thing tonight, gently and without hurry, all the way down. We will start where we are, here in the warm little room, and we will follow the light backward. We will follow it out of your skin, back to the lamp, and from the lamp we will follow it deeper still. We will meet a field. We will meet a speed limit that is not really a limit, but the natural pace of the universe itself. We will meet a hidden symmetry that decided, long ago and without our permission, which kinds of things get to be weightless and which do not. And we will end, if all goes well, back in this same room with the same lamp and the same soft warmth on your skin and the same weightless traveler landing on your cheek. But you will see it differently, you will feel it differently. The room will not have changed, but you will have. For now though, just rest. There is nothing to solve yet. There is nothing to hurry toward. The lamp beside you is still glowing. The tiny travelers are still arriving. They are landing on your hands, on your face, on the fold of the blanket, on the surface of your eyelids if they have started to close. Every one of them weighs nothing. Every one of them is real. Every one of them has crossed the small distance between the bulb and you carrying a small amount of energy that came from somewhere we have not yet named. Somewhere in the softest and quietest layer of what we call reality, there is a place where that energy lives. And in a little while, we are going to find it together. Until then, let the room stay warm. Let the little travelers keep arriving. Let the lamp keep glowing at whatever gentle brightness it is glowing at, and let the strangeness of what is happening around you settle into the background like a familiar old song you had forgotten was playing. There is time. There is more than enough time. Because the story we are tracing tonight has been going on for almost 14 billion years, and the weightless traveler on your skin right now has been part of that story since the very first light in the universe learned how to move. It is old, and it is patient, and it is not going anywhere. Neither are we. So take a slow breath, if you feel like it. Let your shoulders soften. Let your eyes drift, or close, or find some warm middle distance to rest on. And when you are ready, when the room feels settled and the lamp feels less like an object and more like a small, quiet friend, we will step into the next part of this journey, and we will begin to ask, very carefully and very softly, what energy actually is. Because before we can find out where the light gets its warmth from, we have to admit something almost embarrassing. Most of us do not really know what warmth is either, and that admission, quiet as it is the door into everything that comes next. Here is something I have to confess to you before we go any further, and I want you to know that I am not saying it to be clever. I am saying it because it is true, and because the whole rest of this night depends on it being true. Most of us do not really know what energy is. We use the word constantly. We say the coffee gave us energy this morning. We say the runner had too much energy at the start of the race and burned out at the end. We say the storm had enormous energy in it. We say a battery is running out of energy. We say the sun pours energy onto the earth. We say it, and we say it, and we say it. And if you stopped any of us in the middle of the sentence and asked, very gently, what exactly do you mean by that word, most of us would come up short. It is one of those words that sits in the middle of our language like a smooth, worn stone. We have handled it so many times that we have stopped looking at it. We assume quietly that someone somewhere must know exactly what it is, and that if we ever really needed the definition, we could look it up in a book, and it would say something firm and clear that we could then carry away in our pocket. But when you go and look, you find something strange. You find that even the physicists, the ones who use the word more precisely than anyone else, do not talk about energy the way you might expect them to. They do not describe it as a thing. They describe it as a number, a very particular kind of number. I want to walk with you toward what that number really is, because once you feel it, you will feel the whole night differently. And I want us to get there by starting very close to home, close to the little familiar images we all carry around when we hear the word energy. Because we do carry them, even if we never quite think about it. We have a set of small pictures in our heads, and if I say the word energy to you right now, one of them will come. Maybe you see a coiled spring, wound tight, waiting. Maybe you see a hot cup of tea sitting on a table, releasing a soft curl of steam. Maybe you see a car moving down a highway at night, its headlights carving through the dark. Maybe you see a stone let go from a hand, falling toward the earth. These are the little pictures we grew up with. These are what energy looks like to us, in the quiet grammar of our own bodies. And here is the first surprise. None of those pictures are energy, not one. They are containers. They are places where energy is being kept or being carried or being handed off from one form to another. The coiled spring is not itself energy. The spring is metal. The coil is a shape. What we mean when we say the spring has energy is that the arrangement of that metal, twisted into that particular shape, will do something if we let it go. It will unfurl. It will push. It will click a clock hand forward, or send a small toy across a table, or launch a mousetrap shut, and in the doing of that thing, something will move, and something else will slow, and heat may leak out, and sound may leak out, and the total of all those little movements and slowings and leakings will always add up to exactly what was locked into the shape of the coil to begin with. Not more, not less. The spring, in other words, is a place where a certain quantity is being stored. Not the quantity itself, just the place. The hot cup of tea works the same way. The tea is not energy. The tea is water and leaves and warmth. What we mean when we say the tea has energy is that the little molecules inside it are trembling faster than the molecules in the cool air around it. Given time, they will hand off some of that trembling to the air and to the ceramic of the cup and to your hand if you wrap it around, and by the time everything settles, the tea will be cool and the room will be a little bit warmer, in a way you probably will not be able to notice. And the sum of all that trembling will be exactly what it was before, just spread out into a larger space. The cup was a container. The trembling was what was being held. The car is a container too. Not the metal shell, exactly, though the metal shell is what does the containing. What is really carrying the energy is the motion. The whole car, taken together as a big, massive object, is moving at some particular speed. And to slow it down, you have to take something out of it. You have to press the brakes and turn all that motion into heat in the brake pads, or you have to steer into a wall and turn all that motion into the crumpling of metal and the breaking of glass and the terrible sound that comes with it. Either way, the motion has to go somewhere. It cannot simply vanish. It transfers. It changes form. And when everything settles, the total of the heat and the crumpling and the sound and the shudder in the ground is exactly equal to what the motion was carrying to begin with. The falling stone works the same way, but in a different direction. Before you let it go, it is high up and it is not moving, and it does not look like it has any energy at all. But the universe knows. The universe is keeping a ledger. The stone, being high, has something owed to it. When you let it go, that debt gets paid out in motion. It falls, it speeds up. By the time it hits the ground, the height has been fully converted into the speed of the fall, and the speed of the fall has been fully converted into the thud, the little shudder in the earth, the small warmth that briefly appears at the point of impact. Nothing was created. Nothing was destroyed. The height was traded for motion, and the motion was traded for warmth, and the ledger stayed even the whole time. This is what physicists mean when they say that energy is conserved. They do not mean that energy is a thing that sits inside objects like water in a cup. They mean that there is a number, a particular kind of number, that you can compute for any situation in the universe, and no matter what happens next, that number will always come out the same when you add it all up again. The spring uncoils, the tea cools, the car brakes, the stone falls, and every time you add up the total afterward, you find you have exactly what you started with, not one drop missing, not one drop extra. The universe, in this one very specific sense, is a perfect accountant. That is what energy is. It is the number the universe never lets slip. It is bookkeeping. And I want you to sit with that for a moment, because it is not what you were probably told when you were a kid. When you were young, you were probably taught that energy is a kind of stuff, that it flows, that it fills, that it can be given and taken, that some things have a lot of it and some things have a little. That was not exactly wrong, but it was leaving the important part out. The important part is that energy is not really a substance at all. Energy is a promise the universe makes to itself. The promise is that no matter how much the universe rearranges, no matter how much things move and change and heat up and cool down, the total will not shift. The books will always balance. There will always be exactly as much on the right side of the ledger as there was on the left. And once you feel that, once you really let it in, all our little pictures start to make sense in a new way. The coiled spring is not full of energy. The coiled spring is one entry in a ledger. The hot cup of tea is not full of energy. The hot cup of tea is another entry in the ledger. The car and the falling stone are entries too. Each of them is a place where the universe has set some of its bookkeeping down for a little while, in the form of a coil, or a warmth, or a motion, or a height. When those things change, the bookkeeping does not vanish. It just moves. It settles into a different column. It gets logged somewhere else. Now hold on to that idea, because we are about to bring it up against something strange. Every one of those little pictures I gave you had a body in it. The spring was made of metal. The tea was made of water. The car was made of steel. The stone was made of rock. In every case, the thing carrying the entry in the ledger had mass. It had substance. It had weight. That is why the pictures felt so natural. That is why energy has always seemed to us like something that lives inside stuff. Every ordinary example we grow up with is an example of energy hiding inside a thing that has weight. But light does not have weight. We spend all of the last part of this journey sitting with that fact. The little travelers pouring out of the lamp beside you, the ones landing on your cheek and the ones passing through your window and the ones streaming from every star in the night sky, have no mass. None. And yet they carry something. They deliver warmth. They deliver push. They lift electrons out of metal in the trick the physicists call the photoelectric effect. They heat oceans. They travel across billions of years of empty space, and when they arrive, they still have a punch in them. Something in the ledger is being carried across all that distance by things that have no weight at all. That is the puzzle. That is where the ordinary picture breaks. Because if energy usually lives inside things with mass, and if the light in your room has no mass to live inside, then where is the energy actually sitting? I am not going to answer that yet. I promised you at the beginning of this night that we would not solve anything by trickery, and I meant it. But I do want to give you a name to hold on to, because we are going to need it. The scientific word for one of those tiny travelers is photon. You already know this word. Most of us have heard it somewhere. It means one small packet of light. Not a wave, not a smooth continuous thing, but a single little discrete piece. That was one of the great strange discoveries of the last century, and it took some of the brightest minds we have ever produced to make peace with it. Light does not arrive as a smooth pour. Light arrives in packets, small, indivisible, whole. You cannot have half a photon. You cannot have a third of a photon. You can have 1 or 2 or 10,000 or a trillion, but you cannot ever slice one open and get a smaller version. It is the smallest possible piece of light that the universe allows. And each of those pieces carries some particular amount of energy. Not a random amount, a very specific amount, tied to how quickly that particular packet is wiggling as it moves. Red light packets carry a little less, blue light packets carry a little more, ultraviolet packets carry more still. Infrared, the kind that pours off the warm surface of your skin and the warm surface of the lamp, carries a little less than red. Every color of light corresponds to a specific little amount of energy that a single photon of that color is carrying. Every color is a different rung on a very fine, very precise staircase. I mentioned an equation last time, and I said I did not want to unwrap it yet. I still do not want to unwrap it fully, but the equation is what tells you which rung of the staircase a photon is on. It takes the frequency, the number I called a wiggle, and it multiplies it by a very small constant that a man named Planck first stumbled across more than 100 years ago, and out comes the energy of that single little packet. That is all the equation is doing. It is telling you the size of the entry that this one weightless traveler is carrying in the universal ledger. That is all. And once you know it, you can predict what the light will do when it arrives somewhere. You can predict whether it will be able to kick an electron loose from a piece of metal. You can predict whether it will be able to break a chemical bond. You can predict whether it will make the pigment in your retina snap into a new shape and give you a moment of seeing. Now, let me give you a sense of scale, because this is where the strangeness gets its second layer. The amount of energy that a single photon of visible light carries is almost absurdly tiny. Not small in the way a grain of rice is small. Not small in the way a snowflake is small. Absurdly, breathtakingly tiny. If you tried to measure it out in any unit that a human being could reasonably feel, the number of zeros after the decimal point would run off the page. A single photon is not going to warm your hand. A single photon is not going to move a needle. A single photon is not going to trigger a single conscious perception in your eye. In fact, a single photon is so small a payment that most of the machinery of your body cannot even register it. Your retina, in the right conditions, in the deepest dark, can just barely respond to a small handful of them arriving together, but one alone, by itself, is almost nothing. And yet, every second, every waking second of your life, every second the sun is over your horizon, an unimaginable number of these almost nothing packets are arriving. The number is not thousands. It is not millions. It is not billions. The count of photons landing on a hand held out in bright sunlight for a single second lives in a range so large that human language runs out of good words for it long before you finish counting. It is essentially uncountable, and each one on top of another, delivers its tiny entry into the ledger. Together, they are enough to warm your skin, enough to sunburn your shoulders, enough to lift the temperature of the sidewalk under your feet on a summer afternoon. Enough of them, given enough time, could boil a lake. Sit with that for a moment. Enough of these weightless, almost nothing packets arriving together are enough to heat the ocean, drive the weather, feed the plants, and warm the entire lit side of a whole world. That is what the sun is doing to the earth right now, on the far side of the planet from wherever you are. in whatever hemisphere the day is happening. It is pouring these tiny packets down onto everything, one at a time, in numbers so vast that the tiny becomes the enormous. The universe does its heavy work with things that weigh nothing. That is not a metaphor. That is what is happening. Now here is where the puzzle sharpens itself, and where I want us to sit before we take the next step. We just said that energy is bookkeeping. It is a number the universe never lets slip. And in every ordinary case, when there is a number sitting in the ledger, there is a body somewhere with mass, and the body is where the entry is being kept. The spring keeps its entry in the shape of its coils. The tea keeps its entry in the shudder of its molecules. The car keeps its entry in the momentum of its metal. The stone keeps its entry in the height of its position and, later, in the speed of its fall. Every entry, in every ordinary case, has a home, and the home has mass. But a photon has no mass, so where is its entry being kept? I want you to feel that question, really feel it, before we go anywhere else, because it is not a small question. It is one of the deepest questions in physics, and answering it well takes us all the way down through the layers of what we currently think reality is made of. If the ledger of the universe always has to balance, and if the photon is carrying an entry across the room to your skin, and if the photon itself has no body in the ordinary sense of the word, then something else must be holding the entry, something that is not the photon, something that is somehow there in the space between the lamp and you, waiting quietly, ready to carry the number, something we have not yet named. That is the door we are going to walk through in the next part. And I will tell you now, gently, that the answer is not going to be what you might expect. It will not be a hidden substance. It will not be a secret particle inside the photon, some smaller thing tucked inside the traveler. It will be something bigger than the traveler, older than the traveler, and in a certain sense, underneath the traveler. Something you have been sitting inside your whole life without ever noticing. Something that is not really empty, even when it looks empty. Something that fills your room and your neighborhood and your city and your country and the whole planet and the whole sky and the whole galaxy and every stretch of what we casually call empty space between the galaxies. The photon does not carry its own energy in the way we thought a carrier carried a thing. The photon is a small motion of something much larger than itself, and the energy belongs to that larger thing, and only shows up in the photon the way a ripple shows up on the surface of water. The ripple is not the water. The ripple is what the water is doing right now, in a particular little place. That is the shape of what is coming. That is where we are going next. But I do not want to rush the door open. I want us to sit here for a few more breaths in the warm room with the lamp still glowing and let this new picture settle. Energy is bookkeeping. Light comes in tiny packets. Each packet weighs nothing. Each packet still carries a real entry in the universal ledger, and somewhere, in some quiet layer of the world that we have not yet met, the entries are actually being kept. We are about to leave the familiar country of things. We are about to leave the world of springs and cups and cars and stones. We are about to walk into a world where the objects we have always trusted are not really the fundamental characters anymore. The fundamental characters are stranger. They are quieter. They stretch further than any object we have ever picked up. And when we finally meet them in the next part of this night, you will see the small traveler on your cheek in a new way. For now, just breathe. The lamp is still glowing. The tiny packets are still arriving. Each one is a small entry in a ledger you did not know the universe was keeping, and each one is asking, without asking, where its home really is. We are almost ready to find that home. We just have to be willing to leave behind the last of the familiar shapes we grew up with and step into a room that is much bigger than we ever guessed. That room has been here the whole time. That room is the space between things. That room is what we used to call empty. And in the next part, we are going to see, very carefully and very softly, that empty was never really the right word. Not for what fills your room, not for what carries the light, not for what has been quietly holding every entry in the ledger of the universe, from the very first flash of the very first star, all the way down to the small warm glow that is landing on your skin right now. For most of human history, we thought the space between things was empty. That was not a foolish thing to think. It felt so obvious it did not really feel like a thought at all. If you stretch your hand out into the air in front of you, and there is nothing there to touch, then nothing is there. The space between your hand and the lamp is just distance. The space between your window and the moon is just distance. The space between the sun and the far edge of the solar system is just distance. Distance felt like an absence. Distance felt like the part of the world where nothing lived. The ancient thinkers argued about this in the language they had at the time. Some of them thought there had to be a subtle substance in between things, because otherwise how would motion happen? How would light travel? How would the planets stay on their courses? Others said no, empty is empty, and the objects are all that really exist, and the emptiness between them is the plain background against which the objects act out their little dance. For a very long time, most of us, in the quiet corners of our own minds, agreed with the second group. The world was the stuff, the rest was nothing. Even when we started building modern physics, we kept the picture for as long as we could. We drew little diagrams of atoms floating in a vast expanse of vacuum. We drew orbits of planets carved into a black sheet. We spoke, without irony, about outer space, as if space itself were a container into which we had scattered the stars like coins into a jar. The container was empty. The coins were real. The empty container was just the price you paid for having somewhere to put the coins. I want you to hold that picture in your mind for a moment, because it is the picture we all grew up with, and it is the picture we are about to leave, not because it is silly, but because it is not quite true. And when I say not quite true, I do not mean that a small correction is needed. I mean that the emptiness we grew up believing in was never really empty in the first place. Something has been there the whole time. Something has been filling the space between your hand and the lamp, and the space between your window and the moon, and the space between the sun and the far edge of the solar system, and the space between our galaxy and every other galaxy, since long before there was a we around to notice. That something is what we are here to meet tonight. I want to introduce it slowly, because it is the kind of thing that only makes sense if you approach it gently. If I just said the word to you now, you would nod, and then you would forget, because we have all heard the word before, and none of us really knows what it means. So instead of leading with the name, let me lead with the picture. Let me take you into the picture in the way I first found it myself, when the shape of the world started to open up under me and reveal something bigger underneath. Imagine a very still pond. It is a small pond at first. You are standing beside it in the quiet of an evening, and the surface is perfectly flat. No wind, no fish, no falling leaves, nothing disturbing the water at all. If you look down at it, it does not seem to be doing anything. It just sits there, glassy and calm, reflecting the fading sky. Now imagine, very gently, dropping a single small stone into the middle of it. You already know what happens. A ripple spreads out from the point where the stone landed. A circle grows outward from the center, and then another circle grows behind it, and then another. The whole surface of the pond begins to move. If you had a small toy boat sitting on the far edge of the water and one of those ripples reached it, the boat would rock. It would move up and down. Some of the energy of your throw would have traveled across the pond without any part of the pond itself really going anywhere, and arrived at the boat and lifted it and set it down again. That is the picture I want you to hold. Not a bullet moving through the air, not a little pebble flying across a room. A ripple moving across the surface of a calm water, delivering energy from one place to another without any single drop of water actually making the journey. Now imagine that the pond is not small. Imagine it is not a pond at all. Imagine it stretches out in every direction as far as you can see. It fills your room. It fills your neighborhood. It fills your country. It fills the world. It fills the sky. It fills the whole space between the earth and the sun, and the space between the sun and the next star, and the space between our galaxy and every other galaxy, and the deep dark stretches beyond that, all the way to the far edge of the observable universe. There is no shore. There is no bottom. There is no bank. Wherever you point, in any direction, the pond is there, and most of the time it is very still. That stillness is what we used to call empty space. That is the picture I want you to sit with. What we thought was nothing is actually a vast, endless something, spread evenly through the entire universe, holding its stillness. It has a value at every point. Wherever you can imagine putting a fingertip, in the room or on the moon, or 100 light years away in some direction we have no name for, that thing has a value there. Right now, most of those values are quiet. They are close to zero. They are not doing much. That is why we do not notice them. That is why we could go on, generation after generation, thinking there was nothing there. But it is not nothing. It is a field. Say the word gently to yourself. Field. It is a strange word to use for something so vast. It comes from a very old metaphor. The idea of a field of grain rolling out under the sky, or a field of flowers spreading out under the sun. Physicists borrowed the word to mean something similar, but bigger. A field, in the physics sense, is anything that has a value at every point in space. Temperature is a kind of field. If you could measure the temperature at every point in your room, at the tip of your nose, and just above your knee, and near the ceiling, and in the corner behind the door, you would have a temperature field. Every point would have its own number. Most of them would be very close to each other, but they would not be identical. That set of numbers filling the room is what a field looks like when it is small and homely. Now scale that up. The field we are talking about tonight is not a field of temperature. It is a field of something we do not have easy words for, but the physicists call it the electromagnetic field. It has a value at every point in space, from the center of the Earth to the far edge of the visible universe. Wherever you can point, it is there, and it is not a metaphor. It is not a poetic way of saying that space is somehow full. It is as real as the floor under your feet. It is as real as the mug on the table. It has been measured more times than anyone can count, and every measurement agrees. It is there. Most of the time, in most places, its value is very close to zero, and when its value is close to zero, we experience the space as empty. Nothing is happening. Nothing is pushing on us. Nothing is arriving. The pond is still. The surface is glassy. If you set a little boat on it, the boat does not move. But every so often, something disturbs it. Somewhere in your lamp, a tiny electric charge trembles. Just a little. Just a small flick of motion inside an atom in the glowing filament. That flick is enough to touch the field. And when the field is touched, it does what a pond does. It ripples. A little disturbance spreads outward. The field, which was quiet a moment ago, now has a small wave in it, expanding into the room in every direction at once. That wave is what we call light. Let me say that again more slowly, because it is the most important sentence in this whole night so far. What we call light is a ripple in the field, not a stream of little bullets flying across an empty room. A ripple in the field that has been filling the room the whole time. The room was never empty. The field was there. The lamp did not fire anything across a void. The lamp gently disturbed something that was already all around it, and the disturbance is what reached your skin. That changes everything. It changes what it means for something to travel, because the ripple in the pond is not a little water droplet moving across the surface. Each little drop of water is only bobbing up and down in place. The wave, the shape of the ripple, is what moves. The shape carries the energy. The shape carries the entry in the ledger, and when the shape reaches the far side of the pond and rocks the little boat, no drop of water from the middle of the pond actually made the trip. The shape did. The disturbance did. That is what a photon actually is. Not a small, hard traveler flying across an empty room. A shape, a disturbance, a ripple in the field that fills all of space. And here is where the strangeness deepens. In our imagined pond, the ripples can be any size we like. If you drop a small stone, you get a small ripple. If you drop a big stone, you get a big ripple. If you drop something in between, you get something in between. The size of the ripple can slide smoothly through every possible value, but the electromagnetic field is not like that. That was the great discovery of the early 20th century, one of those quiet earthquakes in human thought whose consequences are still shaking through us. When Planck and Einstein and the ones who came after started really looking at how the field ripples, they found that the ripples cannot be any size they like. They come in smallest possible units. There is a floor. There is a minimum. You cannot have a ripple in the field that is smaller than a certain size. You can have that size. You can have 2 of them. You can have 1,000 of them, or 1 billion, but you cannot have half of one. That smallest possible ripple is what a photon is. I want you to feel the shape of what that sentence is saying, because it is subtle. A photon is not a little object that happens to be moving through the field. A photon is the smallest allowed disturbance of the field itself. It is what the field looks like when it is doing the tiniest bit of doing anything at all. Below that size, the field is quiet. At that size, the field has a single photon of light in it. If you double the disturbance, you have 2 photons. If you triple it, 3. The field cannot express itself in amounts smaller than that. That is simply the way the universe writes its lines. Now, come back with me to the question we ended the last part with. Where does the energy of a photon actually live? We already saw that it cannot live in the photon the way heat lives in a mug, because the photon has no mass, no body in the ordinary sense, no substance to store anything in. And now we have the answer. The energy does not live in the photon at all, not in the way we used to imagine. The energy belongs to the field. The photon is the field expressing itself in the smallest allowed portion. The ripple is not the water. The ripple is the water doing something in a particular little place, and the energy carried by the ripple was never separate from the water in the first place. It was always the water moving. When the little photon leaves your lamp and crosses the room to your skin, no small object is making the journey. A disturbance in the field is making the journey. The field, which was already reaching from the lamp to your skin and out to the walls and out through the window and out into the sky, has been given a tiny nudge, and the nudge propagates. The nudge is what arrives. The nudge is what carries the warmth. The nudge is what has been in the ledger the whole time, sitting in the shape of the field, not in some invisible cargo hold of a small hard thing. Let me give you an image to hold on to. Imagine a single, unimaginably long string stretched from one end of the universe to the other. Not a real string, but something like a string in the way it can vibrate. Every point along it is connected to every other point. Most of the time, it is not moving, it is silent. And then, somewhere along it, someone plucks it very gently. A small vibration begins. That vibration is a note. The note travels along the string, moving outward from where the plucking happened. The note is not a thing. The note is the string doing something. The energy of the note is not separate from the string. It is the string expressing itself. A single photon is a single note, plucked from a string that stretches across the whole universe. And the warmth on your skin right now, as you lie or sit in the small room with the lamp glowing, is that string speaking to you softly, in its smallest voice. The lamp is plucking notes, one after another, in numbers too large to hold in the mind. And each of those notes is traveling out from the filament in every direction, and some of them are arriving at your cheek, and each one is landing with the tiniest little touch. Not a bullet, not a projectile, a note, a vibration in something vast and quiet that has been reaching from the lamp to you the whole time. Every warmth you have ever felt from light is that field speaking to you in its smallest voice. Every color you have ever seen is that field singing to you. Every star in the night sky is a distant hand plucking notes in the same field that fills your room, and those notes, after crossing years and years of dark space, are arriving in your eye and being converted into the small, conscious experience of a point of light in the darkness. There is no empty in between. The field has been there the whole time. The stars are plucking. Your eye is listening. Sit with that for a moment. Sit with the idea that the room you are in right now is not a small pocket of stuff in a vast expanse of nothing. The room you are in right now is a small, quiet region of the same enormous field that stretches out to the far edge of everything we can see. You are not alone in the emptiness. You are inside something. You have always been inside something. The lamp is not throwing tiny bodies across a void. The lamp is quietly disturbing a fabric you have been floating in your whole life, and the disturbance is arriving on your skin as warmth, and you are noticing it as the small, soft glow of a familiar light in a familiar room. I find that beautiful. I find it a little dizzying too, not in a frightening way. In the way you feel when someone opens a curtain in a house you thought you knew and shows you a room you had never noticed. The house is still your house. The room was always there. You just did not know how to see it. And here, near the close of this part of our night, I have to leave you with the next question, the one that starts to reshape the whole rest of the story. Because if a photon is a ripple in a field, then it is a strange kind of ripple. Ripples in water can travel at all kinds of speeds. Slow ripples, fast ripples, big lazy swells, fast little chops. But ripples in the electromagnetic field only ever travel at exactly one speed. Always, everywhere, in every direction. Every photon in the universe, from the tiniest low-energy radio wave to the sharpest gamma ray, moves through the field at the same fixed speed. Not a little slower, not a little faster, exactly the same. And no matter how hard anything else in the universe tries, nothing else can ever catch a photon. Nothing can ever overtake it. Nothing can pull up alongside one and look it in the eye. That is a very strange rule. It does not feel like something the universe had to have. It feels like a decision that was made somewhere, deep in the layer beneath the field, before we got here. Why exactly one speed? Why that speed? Why can nothing catch it? Why is a photon eternally out ahead of everything else? Always at the edge of what is possible, never pausing, never slowing, never joined. We are going to answer that next. But for now, let the answer wait. Let the field stay quiet around you. Let the small notes keep arriving on your skin. Let the lamp keep plucking its tiny song into the fabric of everything. And let each note reach you at exactly the same steady pace it has been reaching every listener on every world for as long as there has been light. The room is not empty. It never was. The field is here. It has been holding the ledger the whole time. And in the next part, we are going to walk out to the edge of that field, to the place where its ripples move at the built-in speed of the universe. And we are going to sit with the strange, quiet fact that light is not just fast. Light is exactly as fast as reality itself allows. And that limit, we will find, is not a wall. It is the shape of the pond. There is a number in physics that most of us have heard so many times, it has stopped feeling like a number. We call it the speed of light. We write it as a C on the side of the most famous equation in history, and we say it with the casualness of people who have grown up hearing it. We know, in a vague way, that it is very fast. We know that nothing can go faster than it. We know, if we have thought about it a little longer than most, that it does not really change no matter how you measure it, no matter who is looking, no matter how fast the person measuring it happens to be moving themselves. It just is what it is, always the same, everywhere, all the time. We say it so easily. We forget how strange it is. I want you to sit tonight with how strange it actually is, because it is one of the strangest facts we have ever discovered about the universe, and it is not usually explained to us in a way that lets us feel that strangeness. We are told that the speed of light is a speed. That is technically true, in the same way that it is technically true to say your heartbeat is a rhythm, but it is not the same kind of speed as anything else you have ever known. It is not a car going fast. It is not a bullet moving quickly through the air. It is not even a fast comet crossing the sky. It is something different in kind, not just in degree, because the speed of light is not really the speed of an object at all. The speed of light is the speed of the field itself. Let me say that again more slowly. The number we call c, the number we treat like a limit on how fast a thing can go, is not a rule about how fast objects are allowed to travel. It is the natural rate at which disturbances in the electromagnetic field propagate. It is a property of the pond, not a rule about the ripples. It is how quickly a nudge in the fabric of everything is allowed to spread outward through the fabric. It is baked into what the field is. It is not something anyone imposed on the field from outside. It is what the field does when it does anything at all. And that changes the meaning of the sentence completely. We usually say nothing can travel faster than light, and it sounds like a limit, like a speed limit posted on a highway that everyone has to obey. But it is not that. It is not a fence. It is the pace of the pond. Ripples in the pond travel at the pace of the pond because ripples are what the pond does. There is no way for a ripple to be faster than the pond it is a ripple of. That would not be a rule violation. It would just be nonsense. It would be like asking a shadow to move faster than the light that is casting it. The shadow is a feature of the light. The light does what it does, and the shadow trails along, because that is what shadows are. Photons are what the electromagnetic field does when it does the smallest possible thing, and the pace at which the field can propagate a disturbance is the pace at which photons move, not because someone told them to, because that is what they are. They are the field, expressing itself at the field's own natural rate. Anything that is massless in the same way, anything that is a ripple in a field that has no built-in resistance slowing it down, must travel at this pace. It has no choice. It has nothing else to be. It has no capacity to slow. It has no capacity to stop. It is not being told to move at this speed. It is being this speed. That is the difference. And anything with mass, anything at all, cannot travel at this pace. Not now, not ever, not with a better engine, not with a bigger push, not with a different kind of technology someone might invent 1,000 years from now. Mass is exactly the thing that makes you slower than the field. Mass is what holds you back. Mass is what keeps you from being the pure motion of the pond itself. And there is no in-between. You cannot be a little bit massless. You cannot get almost to the speed of light and then somehow slip through the last little gap. You can approach the speed of light. You can get closer and closer. But every step of the way, the closer you get, the more it costs. And the last little bit costs an amount that is not just enormous, it is unpayable, it is infinite. The universe does not sell that ticket, not to anything with weight. So there are two classes of things in the universe, and the line between them is absolute. There are the massless things, the photons, the gluons, in a way we will not go into tonight. They travel at the speed of the field they are made of, because they are the field doing something, and the field has its own pace. And there are the massive things, the electrons, the quarks, the atoms, the molecules, the chairs, the stones, the stars, the planets, the people. Every one of these has some amount of drag on it, some amount of being held back, and none of them will ever reach the pace of the field. Not one atom in your body has ever moved at the speed of light. Not one atom in your body ever will. Now let me concede something, because I do not want you to think I am hiding behind clever language. When I say all this, it sounds like a rule imposed from outside. It sounds like some cosmic legislator sitting far above us wrote down a speed and made a law and stamped it and moved on. That is the way we usually first hear it. Nothing can go faster than the speed of light. That is the law. But it is not really a law in that sense. Nobody imposed it. It is not a decree. It falls out of the shape of the world itself. Deep in the 20th century, when the physicists started to look carefully at the way space and time are stitched together, they found that space and time are not really separate. They are woven into a single fabric, a fabric that we now call space-time. Every event in the universe, every flick of a candle, every heartbeat, every collision of two atoms in the far corner of a distant galaxy happens at a point in this fabric, not just in space and not just in time, but in both at once, in one single location. And this fabric has a geometry. It has a shape. Not a shape you can see the way you see the shape of a table. A deeper kind of shape. A shape of how distances work. A shape of what counts as close and what counts as far. And when you write down the geometry of this fabric carefully, you find that there is a special edge inside it, not an edge you can walk to. An edge in the geometry itself, a boundary between two ways of moving. Massive things ride around inside the fabric, taking one kind of path. They move through both space and time. They age. They tick forward on their little inner clocks. From their point of view, time passes. From another point of view, they are following curves through space-time that stay well away from the special edge. Massless things ride along the edge. That edge is what we call the speed of light. It is not a wall. It is a special path through the geometry, one that no massive thing can ever quite reach. It is the shortest possible way for something to get from one point in space-time to another while still being in the universe at all. And along that edge, the geometry does something strange. Along that edge, in a certain deep sense, no time passes at all. I want to sit with that carefully, because it is the sentence that opens a door I want to walk through with you very slowly. In the frame of reference of a photon, if we could speak of such a frame in the ordinary way, no time goes by between the moment the photon is born and the moment it is absorbed. None. Zero. It is not a small amount of time. It is not a very fast little tick. It is the same moment. From the photon's own perspective, whatever that phrase can even mean, being emitted and being absorbed are the same event. Let that sit. The photon that entered your eye a moment ago, the one that let you see whatever you are looking at right now, may have started its journey inside a distant star, not the sun, a star hundreds or thousands of light years away. For you, it left that star, crossed vast dark stretches of space, entered our galaxy from far off, drifted past countless other systems, and finally arrived at the pupil of your eye tonight. For you, that journey took hundreds or thousands of years. For the photon, if we could ask, none of that happened. There was no journey. There was no crossing. There was no waiting. It was born at the surface of the star, and it was absorbed by a cell in the back of your retina. And both of those events, for the photon, were the same instant. The star and your eye were, for it, right next to each other. In its frame, no space separated them at all. I want to say that again more slowly, because if you rush past it, you will feel it as a curiosity. If you sit with it, you will feel it as something else. No time passed, no distance was crossed, and yet it arrived. No time, no distance, and yet it arrived. That sentence is a place where the ordinary shape of the world breaks down. And I want to be honest with you, sitting here in this quiet room, that when I first really understood what that sentence meant, it made me feel a little lonely. Not for me, for the photon, which is a strange thing to feel lonely for. But the more I sat with what it meant, the harder it was to shake. Because think about what that photon actually is. From the point of view of the ordinary world, it cannot rest. It cannot slow down. It cannot pause. It cannot age. It cannot look around. It cannot experience anything the way a thing with mass experiences things. From the moment it is born, it is already at the edge of the geometry, moving at the pace of the field, and it stays there for its entire existence, which is not really an existence at all, in the ordinary sense of the word. It does not spend time being. It does not spend time doing. Its entire history, from birth to absorption, is compressed into a single point. And there are photons that were born in the very first moments after the beginning of the universe, almost 14 billion years ago, that are still crossing the space between the galaxies right now, tonight. For us, they have been traveling for almost the entire age of everything. For them, no time has passed at all. They were born, and they are being absorbed in the same instant. The whole vast intervening history of the universe, all the stars that have lived and died, all the galaxies that have formed and drifted, all the civilizations that may have risen and fallen on unknown worlds, all of it, for them, does not exist as duration. It exists as nothing at all. The photon does not know it is old. The photon does not know it is anywhere. The photon does not know anything, of course, because it has no inside, no memory, no experience. But even in the abstract structural sense, it does not have a history. It has only a here and a there, and those 2 points in its frame are the same point. There is something quietly haunting about that. A thing that exists only in motion, a thing that cannot ever rest, a thing whose entire being is a single flash from emission to absorption, no matter how vast the actual distance in our frame. If a photon could feel, it would never feel time. If a photon could remember, it would have nothing to remember. It is a pure passage. It is pure delivery. It is the shape of a message that has no messenger, no envelope, no journey, just a sender and a receiver, and no gap in between. Sit with that a moment, because the light in your room right now, the light landing on your skin from the lamp beside you, is that kind of thing. Every one of the tiny travelers we spent the first parts of this night getting to know Every ripple in the field is riding this edge. Every one of them is, from its own point of view, being born and dying in the same instant. Every one of them is a pure passage of energy across a distance that, for the photon, is not really a distance at all. Every one of them is, in a way, a bridge between two events, folded so tightly along the edge of the geometry that no gap survives. And I called that a little lonely at first. I want to walk that back now, carefully, because I do not want to leave you with the wrong picture. It is not really lonely. Loneliness is a feeling. Photons do not feel, and more importantly, this is not a punishment. The photon is not stuck at the speed of light. The photon is not trapped at the edge of the geometry. The photon is not sentenced to eternal motion by some cosmic judge. To say those things is to sneak the wrong picture back in. It is to imagine the photon as a little person who would rather sit down, and to imagine the universe as forbidding it from ever resting. That is not what is happening. The photon is the speed of light expressing itself. That is the sentence I want you to keep from this part of the night. The photon is not moving at the speed of light in the way a car is moving at 70 miles per hour, as if it could slow down and would rather not. The photon is what the speed of light looks like when it takes a form. The photon is the field at its edge, expressing itself as a small note. There is no self inside it that would rather rest. There is nothing being held back. There is nothing being denied. The photon is what happens when the field ripples in the smallest allowed way, and rippling is what the field does at its own natural pace, and that pace is what we call the speed of light. The whole picture is one picture. There is no traveler being forced to keep going. There is only motion, and motion is what the traveler is. Understood this way, the strangeness softens. The photon is not a lonely wanderer. The photon is a gesture. The photon is the field making a small motion, and that motion is inseparable from the pace of the field itself. To ask why the photon cannot slow down is to ask why a ripple cannot be a stillness. It cannot, because a ripple is what the pond does when it is not still. The moment the pond returns to stillness, the ripple is gone. The moment the photon slows down, it is no longer a photon. There is no third option. The photon exists as motion or does not exist at all. That is what it means to be massless, not to be less, not to be lacking, to be, in a sense, purer, to be the field, doing what the field does without any drag on it from elsewhere. And that pulls us right up against the last big question of this night. Because if mass is what makes something slower than the field, if mass is what pulls a thing back from the edge of the geometry, then mass is not what we usually think it is. Mass is not just how much stuff there is. Mass is not just how heavy something feels in your hand. Mass is a much stranger thing than that. Mass is a resistance. Mass is a drag. Mass is the amount by which something is held back from being what the pure field is. And if that is true, then we have to ask, quietly and carefully, where that drag comes from. What is doing the pulling? What is deciding, for every kind of particle in the universe, how much it gets held back and how much it does not? Why does an electron have some drag on it, but not much? Why does a top quark have a huge amount of drag? Why does a photon have none? Something must be responsible. Something must be reaching into the universe and touching some kinds of ripples and not others. Something must be deciding, quietly and without our permission, who gets to ride the edge and who has to stay behind and be slow. There is a name for that something, and meeting it in the next part of this night is going to change how you see every solid thing you have ever touched. The chair you are sitting on, the floor under your feet, the soft weight of your own body. All of them are heavy because of a quiet conversation between fields that has been going on since the first moments after the beginning of the universe. All of them are heavy because they are being held back from doing what the light gets to do freely. The photon rides the edge because nothing is pulling it back. Every atom in your body is slow because something is. We are going to meet the something in the next part, but not yet. For now, just let the light in your room keep doing what it does. Let the small notes keep arriving on your skin. Let them come from the lamp beside you, and from the moon if it is out, and from the distant stars if you can see them, and let each of them ride in from wherever it was born, along the edge of the geometry, in a single flash from birth to absorption. Let them arrive without knowing they were traveling. Let them land on your cheek as the small warmth we have been calling light this whole time. They have crossed no distance in their own frame. They have taken no time in their own frame. And yet they are here. And yet they are here. And yet they are here. We spent the last part sitting with the strangeness of light, the way a photon rides the edge of the geometry, the way it cannot slow, cannot rest, cannot age, the way it exists as pure motion because it has no mass to hold it back. And I told you near the close that we still had to answer the deeper question. If mass is what makes a thing slower than the field, then where does mass come from? What is doing the pulling? What is deciding, so quietly that we never noticed, which ripples in the universe get to ride the edge and which ones get held back? Tonight, we are going to meet that something. And I want to bring you to it the way you should be brought to something old and beautiful, slowly, in the right light, with time to see it properly. Let me start by returning us to the pond. We spent the third part of this night with a single image. A pond that stretches through all of space. A field that fills every corner of the universe, quiet in most places, gently rippling in others. Those ripples, the smallest ones the field can make, are what we call photons. Every warmth on your skin, every color in your eye, every star in the night sky arrives as one of those small notes in the same vast, quiet fabric. I want you to hold that picture and then let me widen it. Because the electromagnetic field is not the only field in the universe, there are other fields, many of them, threaded through the same space, layered through the same emptiness, sharing the same room you are sitting in right now, are other fields, each with its own kind of stillness, each with its own kind of rippling. They are not far away, they are here. Every point in your room, every point in your body, has values from all of these fields sitting on it at once, quietly, without disturbing each other, without asking to be noticed. There is a field for electrons. It fills all of space, the same way the electromagnetic field does. When it ripples in its smallest allowed way, we get a single electron. Every electron in every atom of your body is a ripple in that field. The electrons in your fingertips right now are not tiny objects that were placed there. They are little quiet vibrations in a field that reaches from your fingertip to the far edge of the observable universe. There is a field for each kind of quark. 6 of them, in fact. 6 different fields for 6 different flavors of quark. When those fields ripple, they give us the quarks that live inside every proton and every neutron of every atom of every star. The core of the sun, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, all of it is quarks, which are ripples in quark fields, quietly humming through the same space you are lying in. There are fields for the other particles too, fields for muons and taus, fields for neutrinos, fields for the carriers of the weak force, fields for the carriers of the strong force. Every kind of particle we know about corresponds to a field, and every particle is what that field looks like when it ripples in the smallest allowed way. There is no particle that is not a ripple in a field. There is no field that does not ripple into particles. The two are the same picture, seen from 2 different angles. So the room you are in tonight is not simple. The room you are in tonight is a place where dozens of these fields overlap, each of them stretching out through the whole cosmos, each of them mostly quiet, each of them occasionally rippling into the particles that make up you and the lamp and the walls and the air and the far side of the moon. Everything you have ever touched is a small local disturbance in a set of fields that stretch to the far edge of everything. Now let me tell you about one more field. This one is different from all the others. It does not carry light. It does not carry matter. It does not correspond in the way the other fields do to a familiar particle that shows up in the world you live in every day. It has a particle, and we did finally find that particle in our own lifetimes. But it took us longer to see it than any other, because for a very long time we could not even tell it was there. This field is quieter than the others. It sits at every point in space, the same way the electromagnetic field does. And for most of history, it did not look like anything. Physicists could write down the equations of the world without it and get almost everything right. Almost. There was a tiny, nagging problem, one that most people would not have noticed. The equations that beautifully described how particles carry forces and how ripples move through fields kept insisting that all the ripples should be massless. Every carrier of every force, according to the deepest symmetries of the theory, should be doing what a photon does, riding the edge of the geometry, moving at the pace of the field, having no drag on it, having no weight. And that was not what we saw. We saw a universe where most particles are heavy, where electrons have some drag on them, where quarks have more, where the carriers of the weak force are quite heavy, heavy enough that the force they carry can only reach the shortest of distances before it fades away, and nothing in the beautiful symmetries seemed to allow it. The symmetries predicted a universe of massless ripples, and the world we live in is a universe of heavy things. Something had to be responsible. Some quiet field, hiding in the background, had to be reaching into these other fields and slowing their ripples down, had to be interacting with some of them and not others, had to be, in some sense, giving them the drag that we call mass. And the strangeness of this field, the reason it took us so long to find, is that unlike every other field we knew about, it did not sit quietly at 0 when nothing was happening. It sat quietly at a value above 0, everywhere, all the time, even in the deepest emptiness we could imagine. This field had a value it was resting at, and that value was not 0, and everything else in the universe was floating in it. That field is what we now call the Higgs field. I want to name it, and then I want to walk away from the name for a moment, because it is not the name that matters. The name belongs to a man who worked out one of the key pieces of the theory. What matters is what the field does, so let me describe it in the plainest way I can. The Higgs field is everywhere. It is in your room, it is in your body, it is between the stars, it is at the far edge of the observable universe. It is threaded through every other field we have talked about tonight, and unlike the electromagnetic field, which is usually quiet, at rest, sitting at zero, the Higgs field is not sitting at zero. It has a value that it holds always in every direction. It is a low, steady hum that fills all of space, and that hum has an effect. Some of the other fields, when they try to ripple, feel the presence of the Higgs field pulling on them, not in a violent way, not in a way that stops them, in a way that adds a kind of resistance to their motion, a drag. The more strongly a field couples to the Higgs, the more strongly it feels this drag when it tries to move its ripples through space. And that drag is exactly what we have been calling mass. Let that sit, because it is going to change how you hear the word mass for the rest of your life if you let it. We have always talked about mass as if it were a substance, as if it were an amount of stuff a particle has inside it. A heavier particle has more mass, we say, the way we might say a heavier bag has more sand. And in our ordinary world, that works. That is a good enough picture. But under the hood, at the level of the fields, it is not what mass really is. Mass is not sand. Mass is not stuff. Mass is a measure of how strongly a particular field couples to the Higgs. It is a measure of how much drag the Higgs applies to the ripples of that field. An electron feels a little bit of drag, not much, enough to give it a tiny mass, small enough that we can barely feel it in any ordinary situation. A top quark feels an enormous amount of drag. Something about the way the top quark field couples to the Higgs is very strong, and so the ripples of that field are heavily slowed, and we say the top quark has a very large mass. The carriers of the weak force feel a lot of drag too, so much that the force they carry cannot reach beyond the size of a proton before it dies away. Every heavy particle in the Standard Model is heavy because it feels the Higgs field pulling on its ripples as they try to move. And now come with me back to the photon. The photon does not feel the Higgs at all. Not a little, not almost none. None. The Higgs field cannot touch the photon. It cannot slow its ripples. It cannot apply any drag to them. And the reason for this is not that the photon is somehow special in a mysterious way. The reason is that the deepest symmetry underlying the electromagnetic field is unbroken. The Higgs field, sitting at its value everywhere in space, cannot reach into the electromagnetic field. The two are, in a very specific mathematical sense, blind to each other. The Higgs sees electrons and quarks and weak force carriers, and it grabs onto them, and it slows them down. But when it looks at the electromagnetic field, it sees nothing to grab onto. There is nothing there for it to interact with. So the ripples in the electromagnetic field, the photons, go by untouched. That is why the photon is massless, not because it lacks something, not because it is missing a piece, not because it is defective in some way. The photon is massless because the symmetry that governs its field is exactly the kind of symmetry the Higgs cannot break. The photon rides through the Higgs field the way a swan rides through the water, without any drag on it, gliding, weightless, at the natural pace of its own field. This is where I want us to pause and let the picture reframe itself, because it turns the whole story of light on its head. We have been trained, quietly, to think of mass as something a particle has, and of masslessness as something a particle lacks. Photons, in the way we usually first hear about them, sound like they are missing something. They have no mass, they have no weight, they have no substance. It sounds like a subtraction. It sounds like a deficiency. It is not a deficiency, it is a purity. The photon is not missing weight. The photon is not being held back by anything. The photon is free of the field that gives everything else its drag. The photon is what a ripple looks like when nothing is slowing it down. That is why it moves at the maximum speed the universe allows. Not because it is special, not because it is fast, because there is no drag on it, because it is free of the invisible field that holds every heavy thing back. When you say a photon moves at the speed of light, what you are really saying is that a photon moves at the pace the field naturally moves at, because nothing else is interfering. It is what the pond does when the pond is left alone. And every heavy thing you have ever touched is what the pond does when it is not left alone, is what a ripple in some field looks like when the Higgs is pulling on it, is what motion looks like when there is a small, quiet, invisible drag applied to every step of the way. Now widen the picture with me. Everything you have ever held in your hand, every stone, every coin, every glass of water, every warm body pressed close to yours in the dark, every animal you have ever cared for, every child you have ever lifted, is heavy because of a conversation between fields. It is not heavy because it is made of heavy stuff in the way we used to think. It is heavy because the electrons in it are being tugged on by the Higgs, and the quarks in it are being tugged on in a different way by different physics. And the whole soft weight of the object in your hand is the sum of a billion small tuggings that have been going on quietly and constantly for as long as the object has existed. Weight is not built in. Weight is negotiated. Every solid thing you have ever loved is holding a small conversation with an invisible field every moment of its existence. And the outcome of that conversation is what you feel when you pick it up. If the Higgs field were to vanish tomorrow, every heavy particle in the universe would suddenly become a photon. Everything would slip loose. Everything would ride the edge of the geometry. Every atom in your body would try to move at the speed of light, and the world as we know it would dissolve, because none of the shapes we live in are shapes that can hold themselves together in the absence of that drag. The Higgs is what makes matter possible. The Higgs is what allows things to be things. Sit with that. The chair you are sitting in is a solid chair because of the Higgs. The floor you are standing on is a floor because of the Higgs. Your own body has its familiar softness, its warm weight, its slow, gentle presence, because the Higgs is pulling on every field that makes you up, in exactly the right pattern to hold your shape together. You are heavy because you are having a conversation with a field you cannot see. You are stable because that field is holding steady. Your weight is not yours in the way you thought it was. Your weight is on loan. Your weight is the outcome of a small, quiet negotiation between the fields you are made of and the field that fills all of space. And in the middle of that room, full of heavy negotiated things, The photon slips through untouched. It does not have that conversation. The Higgs cannot see it. The Higgs cannot slow it. The Higgs cannot touch it. And so the photon glides through the field that gives everything else its weight, without any hitch, without any drag, without any pull. It is a survivor of a purer symmetry. It is a leftover of a state the universe once was in more completely, back when the Higgs was not yet holding at its value, back in the earliest moments of the world when everything was massless and everything rode the edge together. That is what a photon really is, a leftover of an older, symmetric time, a small ripple in a field that never lost its innocence, a note in a song the universe used to sing more purely, back when nothing was heavy, back when nothing had weight, back when every kind of ripple traveled at the same pace because there was no drag anywhere. The rest of us paid a price for the world we live in. Our atoms are held together by heaviness. Our stars burn because their cores are dense enough for fusion. Our bodies feel each other in the way we do because we have weight, and weight is what lets us press against each other. All of that, all of the tenderness of the world of things is possible because the Higgs is doing what it does, and the photon carries the messages between all of it. Free, weightless, unslowed. I find that beautiful in a way that is hard to name. The heavy world was built at the cost of a broken symmetry. The messenger between all of its pieces is a survivor of the symmetry that was not broken. Light is old. Light is older than atoms. Light is older than weight. Light is what the universe was doing before it settled into the world of things. And light is still doing it, right now, in the small warm bloom of your lamp, in the arrival of every note on your skin. Every photon that reaches you is a piece of an older universe, visiting a younger one. Every warmth on your face is the sound of a symmetry that was never broken, singing to a world that was built by breaking one. Sit with that a moment, because it changes the meaning of a room. The heaviness of your body is the price of your existence. The lightness of the light around you is a memory of a time before that price was paid. And the two, tonight, are meeting on your skin in the quiet arrival of every small note of warmth from the lamp beside you. The heavy self and the weightless messenger. The atoms with their drag and the ripples without any. The old song and the newer world folded together for a moment. In you, in this room, in the softness of whatever hour you are in. In the next part, we are going to bring it all home. We are going to sit back down in the room, in the same warm bloom of the same lamp, and we are going to look at every question we have opened tonight and let it close, softly, one by one. We are going to find, with quiet joy, that the small weightless traveler on your cheek is not a curiosity. It is a whole picture of the world. It is the answer to every question we have asked tonight, and it has been waiting patiently for us the whole time. But not yet. For now, just let the room stay soft around you. Let the light keep arriving, note by note, from a field that has never been touched by the drag that makes you heavy. Let the warmth on your skin be the visit of an older, purer motion. Let your own weight, the soft settle of your body into the chair or the pillow or the mattress, be the sound of your fields having their quiet, endless conversation with the Higgs, holding you together, keeping you where you are, giving you the softness of being here at all. The world is heavy so that you can be held. The light is weightless so that you can be reached. And somehow, in the small room you are lying in tonight, both of those things are true at once. Come back to the room with me. The lamp is still glowing beside you. Wherever you have been lying or sitting all this time, the blanket is still where you pulled it up. The mug on the table, if there was one, has grown a little cooler. The night outside your window has moved a small distance without asking your permission. Nothing has changed in this room in the way rooms change. And yet, everything has changed. Because the meaning of what is happening in this room right now is not what it was when we started. I want you to notice the warmth on your skin. Wherever the light is landing on you, on the back of your hand, on the side of your face, on the arm you left too close to the bulb, notice it. Not with a rush of attention, just softly. Feel it there. That warmth is arriving on you every moment I speak. It has been arriving on you the whole time we have been sitting here together, quietly, without interruption, since long before you turned this on. It has been arriving on you your entire life, from lamps and from windows and from the small suns of the daytime sky, and you have felt it and named it and grown used to it and forgotten most of the time to wonder what it was. Now you know a little more about what it is. It is not what you were told when you were a child and someone tried to explain light to you as tiny bullets flying across the room. It is not that. There is nothing landing on you tonight that is a piece of substance. There is nothing arriving on you that has weight. There is nothing pressing on your cheek that could be picked up with a pair of tweezers and set on a scale. What is arriving on you is the field itself, the electromagnetic field, the vast, quiet fabric that stretches from the tip of your finger to the far edge of the observable universe, filling every point of space with a value that is usually still, that is usually near zero, that is usually indistinguishable from nothing. That field is what is here in your room. It is what fills the space between the lamp and you. It has always been here. It was here before your room was built. It was here before this house was built. It was here before this city, this country, this planet, this star, this galaxy. It was here at the very beginning of the universe, when it first became possible for it to exist at all. And tonight, right now, that field is whispering. The lamp beside you is disturbing the field in the smallest ways it can, over and over, more times a second than any number that has meaning to a human being. Every one of those small disturbances is a note. Every note travels outward through the field at the natural pace of the field itself. Every note that arrives on your skin lands with a tiny, weightless little touch, and what you feel as the warmth of the light is the sum of an unimaginable number of those tiny, weightless touches arriving together without pause all night long. Each one of them is a photon. Each one of them is a ripple in a field that stretches across the entire observable universe. Each one of them is moving at the edge speed of reality itself, not because someone told it to, but because it cannot do anything else. Each one of them is carrying an amount of energy that never belonged to the photon alone. That energy belongs to the field. The photon is only the field, expressing itself in the smallest allowed portion. That is what has been happening this whole time. That is what has been happening your entire life. That is what has been happening across the whole visible universe, in every warm patch of light, on every world, for almost 14 billion years. And now, quietly, you know it. I want to take each of the questions we opened tonight and let them close, one at a time, softly. We asked, in the beginning, where the energy of a photon actually comes from. Where does the energy live? If the photon itself has no mass to store it in. And now we know, it comes from the field. It lives in the field. The photon is not a container for the energy. The photon is what the field looks like when the field has some energy in a particular place, in the smallest allowed portion. There is no ledger being carried by the tiny traveler. The ledger is in the fabric that fills the room. The traveler is only the shape the fabric is making, right now, in a small local place. We asked how the field is able to hold that energy, and now we know. Because energy is not a substance that has to sit inside something with mass. Energy is a property of the shape of a field. When the field is still, the energy is low. When the field ripples, the energy is higher. The size and speed of the ripples, together, are what the energy is. The field does not need to be made of stuff, in the ordinary sense, to hold energy. It is not a container. It is not a bucket. The field is what the energy lives on, the way a wave lives on the surface of water. There is no wave without water. There is no photon without the field. We asked why the photon has to move at the speed of light, why it cannot slow, why nothing can catch it, why it rides that particular edge and no other. And now we know, because it is massless, because it is a ripple in a field, and the field has a natural pace at which its ripples move, and that pace is what we call the speed of light. Because the photon has no drag on it, nothing pulling it back, nothing holding it slow. It moves at the pace of the field because it is the field, doing what the field does when nothing is interfering. The speed of light is not a rule imposed on it. The speed of light is what the photon is. And we asked, at the end of the last part, why the photon is massless in the first place, why some particles are heavy and this one is not. And now we know that too. Because the deepest symmetry underneath the electromagnetic field is unbroken. Because the Higgs field, which reaches into so many other fields and gives them their drag, cannot reach the electromagnetic field. Because there is nothing about the way the photon is written into the fabric of the world that would allow the Higgs to touch it. The photon is not lacking mass. The photon is free of the field that gives everything else its mass. It is a survivor of a purer symmetry. It is a piece of an older version of the universe, still visiting us, still doing what it has always done, still moving through everything without being slowed by anything. Every question we open tonight has an answer, and every answer points back to the same place. The field. The photon is the field. The energy is the field. The speed is the field. The masslessness is the field being what it has always been, unbroken and untouched. Now let me widen the lens one last time. I want you to think about how much of your life has been given to you by these weightless messengers. Every color you have ever seen, every one. The blue of the sky on a clear day, the gold of a candle in the dark, the red of a cheek warm from laughing, the green of a young leaf in the spring, the soft pink of the first light before sunrise, the deep black of a night sky with stars in it, all of it, all of the color of your entire life, from your first opened eyes to whatever moment you last really looked at anything, was delivered to you by weightless ripples in a field that has always been here. Every star in every night sky you have ever stood under, every point of light in the vast dark, whether you were a child looking up from a backyard or an adult standing in an unfamiliar city looking up between the buildings, every one of those was a message. Not from a place, exactly, from a moment. The light from every star you have ever seen was born in the burning heart of that star, and rode out through space, and crossed distances that no atom in your body will ever cross, and finally arrived at your eye, weightless and unslowed, from a distance so vast that from your perspective it took years or centuries or millennia to arrive, and from the light's own perspective it took no time at all. Every star you have ever seen has been visiting you in the same instant it left home. Every face you have ever loved by lamplight. Every one. The person who tucked you in when you were small, if there was such a person. The friend across the table at a restaurant, laughing over something you no longer remember. The stranger who once turned to you in a train station and smiled for no reason. The face of someone who is no longer here, remembered now under a soft yellow light in a quiet room. Every one of those faces reached you through weightless messengers. The image you carry of them, the image that lives quietly in your memory, was assembled from an unimaginable number of tiny notes in a field, arriving one after another on the back of your eye, over the course of a few seconds or a few hours or many years, adding up to the small, warm sense of who that person was. The universe did not need to give the light substance for any of this to matter. In fact, the whole reason any of it works is that the light does not have substance. If photons had mass, they would slow. If they slowed, they would be caught by every drag in the universe. They would tire, they would fade, they would never cross the vast distances between stars, and the sky, on every world with eyes, would be dark. Sit with that for a moment. If light had weight, the sky would be dark. If light had weight, we would not have the sun. If light had weight, no star would ever have reached us, because none of them would have had the energy to send anything across the distances involved. The lightness of light is not a curiosity. It is the reason we can see at all. It is the reason there is such a thing as day. It is the reason there is such a thing as color. It is the reason the sun reaches the leaf, and the leaf builds a sugar, and the sugar feeds a body, and the body has warmth, and the warmth becomes the small soft life we are living tonight. It is the reason the star reaches the eye, and the eye becomes an opening into a universe far bigger than the body it is set into. It is the reason the warmth of the lamp beside you reaches your skin at all, in this quiet room, in this quiet hour. Because the photon is massless, the cosmos speaks to us. Because it has no weight, it can cross the whole world without getting tired. Because it rides the edge of the geometry, it can arrive from anywhere and anywhen, and still bring what it was born with. The lightness is not a lack. The lightness is the gift. Let me bring us home now. Come back to the small warm room. Come back to the lamp beside you. Come back to the little arm of light on the arm of your chair, or the soft glow that has been sitting patiently on the pillow next to yours the whole time we have been talking. Look at one photon, Not really, of course. You cannot see just one, but imagine one, just one small ripple in the field, born a fraction of a second ago in the filament of the lamp or in the tiny mechanism of the soft light beside you, traveling out across the tiny distance between the bulb and your cheek, landing on your skin right now as I say this. One small weightless note, one small gift from a field older than every atom in your body. That photon is not strange anymore. It is not a paradox. It is not a puzzle. It is a small piece of the same fabric that fills the whole universe. It is a small survivor of the older, purer motion. It is a small message from a field that has been reaching from the lamp to you all night. It is a small warmth. It is a small hello. It is a small delivery of energy that was never separate from the field that made it possible. And every second, without pause, an unimaginable number of them are arriving, each one weightless, each one older in a way than your body, each one riding the edge of the geometry from birth to absorption in the same instant, each one landing on you gently as a small note of warmth. I want to speak to you now, at the end of this, as softly as I can. You are being touched right now, not by a metaphor, by actual ripples in an actual field that stretches from where you are lying all the way to the far edge of the observable universe. Ripples that were born in the lamp beside you, and in the moon if it is out, and in every star you can see from where you are, and in stars you cannot see, and in stars that have already died. All of them are reaching you tonight. All of them are landing on your skin, on the closed lids of your eyes if you have started to let them close, on the softness of the hair at your temple. You are inside the field. You have always been inside the field. You were never alone in an empty room. There has never been an empty room. There has always been this quiet fabric holding you, humming softly at every point, reaching from you to everything else, carrying the warmth in tiny notes that weigh nothing. You are being touched right now by ripples in a field older than every atom in your body. You are being warmed right now by messengers who have taken no time to arrive. You are being seen, if anyone is looking at you, by light that had no weight and no journey and yet is here. Let your eyes rest. If they are open, let them soften. If they are closed, let the darkness behind them be a friendly darkness, the kind of dark that is not empty but full of the same field that fills the day. Let the lamp beside you keep glowing at whatever gentle brightness it is glowing at. Let the little warm notes keep landing on your skin. Let each one be exactly what it is. Not a bullet, not a substance, not a thing. A small ripple in the field that has been holding you all along. A small message from an older, purer state of the world. A small piece of the universe visiting you tonight, weightless and complete. You are safe. The room is safe. The field is holding you. The light is arriving without cost, without weight, without journey, without ever growing tired. And in a little while, when you are ready, you will drift towards sleep, and the field will still be here, and the light will still be arriving, and the lamp will keep sending its small, quiet notes across the small space between the bulb and your cheek, whether you notice or not. Sleep well tonight. Dream, if you dream, of a small, weightless traveler landing on your skin. Dream of a field older than every atom in your body, humming softly under everything, holding you gently in place. Dream of a warmth that has no weight and needs none, and reaches you anyway. The lamp is still glowing, the room is still soft, the field is still here, and you are still being touched right now by the oldest, lightest song the universe knows how to sing. Rest.